This is the Boardroom Exchange. From Macro Capital.
Jonny Wilkinson, thanks for joining us on our first episode on this podcast. So, MD, co-founder of Equitise. It's for those who don't know, it's a equity crowdfunding platform, pretty much leading the path for Australia to be able to, give access to retail investors unlisted opportunities. How did it all happen? How did it start? How'd you get into this?
Watching the UK, where equity crowdfunding had sort of begun to take off. So Crowdcube and Seedrs are the two main platforms. Mm-hmm. We both sort of had itchy feet. We were kind of sick of what we were doing with our jobs, and got chatting. Wanted to put together a deck and a model and go out and raise some money. Fortunately, a couple of days later on my iris, something came up. AWI Ventures looking to raise some early stage ventures. So AWI Ventures is now known as H2. So it's a fintech and now AI, data accelerator. We pitched the idea to them, and it went from there. So, in its simplest terms, we want to do equity crowdfunding, which is kind of the thin, sexy edge of the wedge, and then do all unlisted capital raising for companies.
I remember getting whiff of it sort of later on in the cycle of when it was introduced, and thinking to myself, that sounds like a good business. But you guys were one of the first to get the license, right? Was that a nightmare as expected, or because I know a couple of companies now trying to do it, and it's not that simple. Anything with ASIC is not that simple.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a very specific AFSL to do equity crowdfunding, and there's a lot of restrictions and requirements around how you can do it, what you need to do, and the obligations on the companies doing it, or the intermediaries, the sort of brokers, middlemen. Look, I mean, it's good, particularly given it's a new market and it's somewhat deregulated itself, that, the gatekeepers or the people sitting in the middle have a decent level of, probity and requirements on them. I think it's suitable. It's other parts of the regulations that would probably push to have relaxed or changed that would help the market more. I think there's now something like 15 people with licenses to do it. In my opinion, Australia's sort of too small to support more than a handful of those. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We were involved pretty heavily early on with the government helping the legislation get formed and the policy.
I think I read on the website you were advised to the Treasury.
Yeah, so I was on an advisory panel to the Treasurer and the Prime Minister. I feel very passionate about what I'm doing, and I think that is one of the most important things that any entrepreneur needs to have. If you're not passionate, then it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of grind.
A lot of bullshit you have to deal with, and if you're not passionate about it, it's not really worth it, is it?
Yeah. So as long as you have passion and perseverance, sort of over the past almost decade of dealing with startups and entrepreneurs and those sorts of things, I think I've condensed. They're probably the two main attributes that someone needs to be able to succeed. It's a long and lonely journey, being an entrepreneur. So again, if you're not passionate and if you don't have the ability to persevere, then the probability of you succeeding is obviously diminished.
But delegation is a huge challenge that I've faced, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs face, because as you sort of pointed out, 95% of how to do things, and what to do and how to solve that problem. You start delegating that to people that you've brought into the business, and there's always a disconnect between what you want and what someone else thinks you want. Even in this conversation, what I say, 95% of it you're soaking in, 5% it gets misconstrued. It's psychological. But how have you managed that situation? When someone does something for you, you say, hey, work on this project, and it comes out completely off to what you expected. How do you manage that?
You need to control that which you can control and that which is really important. And if it's not mission critical, the benefit of giving it to someone else and them learning and or doing something and relying upon diversity of people and thoughts and different ways of looking at things ultimately will help grow. So I'm a bit of a perfectionist and can some at times micromanage certain things, but I've learned over time what's important and what's critical. If it's something regulatory and license related, as much as I don't like doing that, I do need to make sure that we're across that and that it's done perfectly.
I think that's a challenge that a lot of fintech specifically are facing right now, because the idea of fintech is that it's new. We're trying to disrupt something that's fairly traditionally done. But the problem is the clients are all traditional, or the customers that we're sort of dealing with. And so you have this kind of transition between, I guess that's really what Equitise is doing, I think, where you're bridging that gap between what it has been for many, many years, many decades now, and how companies raise capital, and you're looking to transition that into something that's, for the next generation, really. I look at your branding. I look at sort of the attributes of Equitise, and it definitely screams out, hey, we're looking to change things up here and with a new face of capital raising. That being said, you are dealing with that generation above us, or even two, the people with the cash, really, the investors. Do you see that changing as a sort of paradigm shift? Do you see a lot of retail investors who are a lot younger enter the market? Is that sort of data that you guys are picking up on, or is that something we're a little bit, we're not there quite yet?
Look, I mean, at its core, finance is about trust, right? If you're giving someone money with an expectation of a return or an outcome, you've got to trust. And then if there's someone in the middle, like us, then you've got to trust the person in the middle as well as the person you're giving the money to. That is fundamental to all finance. DeFi and new ways of looking at things. There might be a protocol or a program or something in the middle that helps provide that trust and that layer. But if you're doing anything in finance, and particularly fintech, you've got to make sure that you don't forget about that. One of sort of my mentors, guy Ben Heap, he always says that if you're doing something in fintech, it needs to be 10 times better than the incumbent. Otherwise, it's not worth it. It's not going to cut it.
I guess we touched on passion, and we touched on what sort of drives an entrepreneur to, I guess, have the resilience or have the ability to have that resilience and fight through some of the bullshit that we all have to deal with, which they don't teach you in school, by the way. It's a big problem that I have with anything prior to my 20s. I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me? But I guess what have you found to be criteria when you meet someone? I mean, intelligence has to be, let's face it, has to be a certain, variable that you look at that means quite a lot to you from the get-go. Obviously, that's expressed through their business model and the documents that they're prepared to apply onto the Equitise platform. But just you personally, if you sort of take a look at things that you've gone through and the companies that enter your door, what are you looking for? What's the criteria that you guys have without giving away the secret sauce?
But yeah, look, I think getting back to your question, what we look for is people who have passion and or obviously domain experience around what they're trying to do. People that have integrity and desire to make a change. Most of what we're looking to raise money for are things that are your traditional kind of venture capital, getting a 10 times or greater return. So it can't just be someone with a small, manufacturing business that's moderately profitable that just wants to raise money to buy another machine, and then, the returns are going to be quite modest. Technically, there's nothing wrong with that business, but for the risk and the process and everything associated with that, the returns don't necessarily match the risks.
How much are you weighing up between idea and execution?
Look, I mean, if you have the best idea in the world and you can't execute, your idea is worth nothing.
I've seen some horrific standards in people. I've seen people just be in bad situations. I've been dragged into them. Things don't go your way. The weather, it just wasn't right. The stars didn't align. The execution just didn't go through. What's been the biggest challenge for you, I guess, in starting Equitise or growing Equitise and being a part of this entire journey? Where have you, if ever, where have you come close to saying, you know what, I'm done? Or has that never crossed your mind?
There's definitely times where it feels as though you've been unfairly dealt with, or you've been given a bad hand, or the stars don't align. But that's, again, taking the risk and trying to do something new, and that's being an entrepreneur.
I look at all of the rewards of business or success, I would say, and you see it all over social media these days, which is half the problem. But you see all of this glamorization of the entrepreneurial route, and the problem is, one is they're either not there yet and they're utilizing social media like everyone else does, and it's just this facade, or they've made it and no one gets to see the tough side of things.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, as you say, you have power and responsibility. It's like a part of you, having a company or having a company you start and being an entrepreneur is, like having a child.
If a former employee says, hey, enough of that, it's tempting, right? But
I'm
like
almost
said,
definitely never going to go back into to that sort of
to
world.
the banking,
Yeah. It's not for me.
Me neither.
But yeah, look, it's hard because,
Do you have a lesson that you can teach the audience of future entrepreneurs, which I'm sure a lot of our audience is? How do you get through that shit?
If you can't step back and either get someone's advice or look at it differently, then you can't get out of that. So having, mentors and peers and people that you can talk to, and more importantly, having a support network around you as an entrepreneur is crucial, right?
Ages ago, I was still in uni. I actually studied or entered a course called Computer Science 101 just to find devs that might be willing to work with me on a project that I had. And I guess it's like, if I had the infrastructure of mentors, advisors, cash, might I add, a lot of the problems that I faced during that sort of venture would have been a lot easier to handle.
Someone once told me pretty early on, the guy who's quite successful businessman, his motto is, he wants, and I think it's an old quote, but this guy kind of took it and tweaked it.
Makes it cooler, yeah.
Yeah, he wants everyone to owe him a favor. Because if someone or if everyone owes you a favor, then you can ask that person for something.
Well, it's our first one, because it's our first episode, but we want to ask it to every guest appearance. In line with the title of our podcast, the Boardroom Exchange, what's the craziest boardroom or slash just meeting that you've had that you can sort of divulge some details into?
Sam Neill, the actor, was involved with business, and we were doing some recording, and initially it sort of started, and often we are helping kind of with a script and direct when we're filming stuff for companies. So I went in there, had some material, had some stuff, and was going to start helping direct. And not long after we began and we started filming, and I went to sort of go give some instructions. Sam very politely sort of said to me, "I've done this a few times before. I think I've got a bit of a rough script. We'll be right." That was a pretty cool thing.
Thanks for coming on the show, Jonny Wilkinson. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.